Hello and welcome to another Boer Republic podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Today's discussion is a thought-provoking one, and especially so for men who seek to understand their place in a world, and for that matter, our country, that openly discriminates and fosters loathing for the very important roles that men serve in a functioning society. He has kindly extended an invitation to those in South Africa to contact him on his various social media pages. This is especially so for those who seek refuge, self-improvement, or even who want to speak with like-minded people who have experienced the frustration and isolation of the South Africa we find ourselves in. Alternatively, please contact us if you would like us to put you in contact with him regarding what he speaks about in this interview. His gracious offer is part of a long-term plan to assist and serve fellow South Africans in any way possible, especially with the intention of rebuilding something for our people in as practical a way as possible. There will be more discussions and content in this direction in the future, so please subscribe and follow us to keep up to date on any new content and announcements. We first heard of our guest on Endeavour's channel, who is a good friend of this podcast. I would encourage each and every one to go and listen to the discussion that Endeavour had with tonight's guest, entitled Rhodesia, South Africa, and the Future of the West, an interview with Eldr, on YouTube and Bitchute. More so on Bitchute, by the way. That interview serves as an excellent background to some of the points mentioned in tonight's discussion. Not only that, but Endeavour has thought-provoking content that many will find useful in the challenging times we find ourselves in. There is one quote I would emphasize that serves as food for thought along with today's discussion, as it reflects the cyclical nature of the world we find ourselves in. It reads as follows: Hard times make strong men. Strong men make good times. Good times make weak men. And weak men make hard times. Our men need to stand together, unite, and create something new. This is why tonight's discussion with Eldr regarding brotherhood and the need for traditional masculinity is so important. Thank you for listening and enjoy. Today it is our pleasure to welcome Eldr. He is a South African expat with a family history in what was then known as Rhodesia. He has spoken out about South Africa previously and has his own YouTube and Bitchute channels. He has unique perspectives as an expat serving for a year in Afghanistan and living abroad, especially in comparison to his time in South Africa. Eldr, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak.
Our pleasure to have you on the show. Off air, we mentioned an interview that you did with another friend of the show, Endeavour, on YouTube, and that was quite an interesting interview. It had lots of perspectives that one doesn't always hear from those abroad, especially who's had experience with the current situation in South Africa. Just before we get into some of those topics, would you please tell the audience a bit more about yourself, your background, and where you stand on matters?
Sure, no problem at all. So I was born in Durban. My parents are not from South Africa, or they weren't born in South Africa. My mother was born in Italy and immigrated after the war. And my father was born in Rhodesia and then left there soon after things started to turn for the worst and tried to have a better economic outcome in South Africa, which was great for a while. One of my greatest joys and deepest sorrows is the fact that I had such a great childhood growing up in South Africa, and now there's nowhere on earth that I can reproduce that for my children. So that's a bit of a bittersweet thing for me. How I arrived at the place that I did, I was always craving something. I couldn't quite put my finger on it until I had a bit of experience in the world, and that sort of filled in the gaps to a degree. I never felt like there was a platform or a place where the ideal that I had of what a man was or what society should be existed. I looked, to personalities, to heroes and role models, but it just wasn't there. And it was getting to a point that I either had to give up on that dream or say something and do something to bring it about. So it's not like I chose to do this. It sort of chose me. So that's where I am.
Yeah, thank you for being on the show. Much appreciated. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about your life when you kind of left South Africa, when you went abroad, and how you ended up in war zones such as Afghanistan, and what was your experience there?
Sure. I left South Africa because things were quite bad. I lived next to a petrol station, and there were just shootouts almost bi-weekly at the petrol station, and people were going around robbing all the elderly and, tying them up, beating them, all the rest of it that you hear quite a lot about today. I mean, that was going on prior to 2004 before I left. And it just got so bad that my father and my mother decided to immigrate and to again, like their parents before them. How destiny works in that way is quite remarkable. But they decided to do the same thing, and we moved to the UK. When I was in the UK, I was completely overwhelmed. I wasn't prepared for the globe, as a concept, and the UK is very much a global country, and especially London, where I worked for a while. So it was a deep learning curve. When I was working there, I had a menial job, nothing exciting at all. And I just wasn't satisfied by any of it. Growing up in South Africa, you're out doing stuff. You're out in the wild, so to speak, and you're challenging yourself all the time. You're doing exciting things. It's not mundane or routine in any way. At least it wasn't for me. And life in this sort of global context is very, very set on the rails. And I just couldn't deal with that kind of environment. So I started to look for other areas to have some of that realness or that rawness of life back in. And so I started doing cage fighting for a while. The pay wasn't exactly great. So I thought I could, for purely selfish reasons, not to necessarily defend the UK or anything like that, but because I wanted to test myself in a challenging environment, I thought I'd try with the armed forces. And I chose the most difficult one that I could. And I managed to get through. I did a bit of anti-piracy stuff for a while, which was quite interesting. Spending a lot of time on board ship was another important moment in my life, which developed a lot of the introspection that has come to rule me, so to speak. And when I got back from that trip, there were a few options available to us. We could specialize into a few different areas, and there was a language aptitude test that was going around. And I thought I'd throw my name in the hat, and I scored quite highly. And I was accepted on a crash Pashtun course prior to the deployment of Herrick 17, where I deployed with my unit in a frontline role, as well as handling some of the cultural aspects as well as the translation. The commander mindset, as you guys I'm sure are well aware, is that you have to be as efficient as possible. So having a fighter who's also a translator just saves the seats on the helicopter. So that was the idea behind it, and that's how I deployed. If you like, if you want to ask me any questions about what the actual experience was like in Afghanistan, feel free. But to give you an overview, as with most wars, it's 90% boredom, doing mundane things just to pass the time, and then it happens like a spark, and then things happen and things unfold, and it progresses from there. But yeah, it was interesting. I never had surety in my ability to deal with that situation. I had a belief that I could go there and be successful and not lose my mind when it came down to the real issues in the real time. When your finger's on the trigger and you've got to do what is there, or if you have to face certain situations, you don't really know how you'll react until you're there. And I managed to satisfy that curiosity about myself, and that in some way gave me the confidence to lead me down the path that I've come so far.
As someone who, it seems, is particularly interested in testing oneself, in improving oneself, and that's especially a trait that I think most modern males don't always apply, especially in the physical world, in reality, so to speak. In regards to your experience with anti-piracy assignments, were you stationed along the Somali coast? To what would you compare it? Not every average South African ever comes close to that sort of experience.
Right. Yes, I was in that area, Gulf of Aden. We were in and around the area at the time where Syria was just kicking off, where the civil war had just started. We were on call, ready to go in if required. It didn't turn out that, although in retrospect, it might have been the better option to go in, because things would have ended before ISIS was created, but that wasn't to be. In terms of the anti-piracy stuff, nothing really happened. I enjoyed being on ship. I liked climbing to the highest points on the ship possible and just being alone. The view of the sky is amazing, no lights, etc. It's just an otherworldly experience almost. I went to a place called Djibouti, that's a very interesting place. It's like a non-country in that it's a port that is used by a multitude of armed forces, and it has like one night hotel, a Hard Rock cafe, and then just utter dire poverty everywhere else. I mean, you know what it's like being in South Africa. You know what poverty is like, but this was on a scale that I had never imagined possible. Just the sheer human suffering that was there was eye-opening. And one of the interesting things that I learned from that experience is that that's where equality lies. That's the only place equality lies, is in that kind of mutual suffering. In a free and open and fair system, there will never be equality, nor should there be. But it was just an interesting thing that I took away from that, realizing that, no matter who it was, what race they were, what their ideas were, what their character was, what their ability was, when they're in that situation of suffering, there really is nothing that they can do. So, the AIDS rate in Djibouti is off the scale. Prostitution is off the scale. And, it's all focused on serving the military, not necessarily doing anything for the people. The people there are they're not even treated like cattle or anything like that. They're just, isolated, floating, atomized pieces of meat, as harsh as that sounds.
It's actually quite eye-opening to hear this, at the risk of revealing more harsh truths. How does that compare to your experience in Afghanistan? Because, that's also obviously not something that we as South Africans are exposed to, since it is usually a purely Northern Hemisphere situation. If you think about Europe and the US involvement, what was that experience like?
When I went there, I had an idea of an oppressed populace being terrorized by the Taliban militia, scarred people from countless wars, but it wasn't as nicely or neat as I thought it was. It's very, very difficult to identify who your enemy is and who the person you're trying to save is. Sometimes from one moment to the next, it's the same individual. The issue with Afghanistan, I think, is that after so long, after the high IQ people have all left when they first faced issues with Russia back in the day, that took a big hit, and the way that they were treated during that war. And if you can imagine a population that has just been utterly decimated and abused and raped and raised under those circumstances, then you can understand how the modern day people, again, almost have no choice in the way that they behave. I don't know what's left of their culture, or what I saw as their culture is in fact their culture, or just some remnants of it after what has happened to them after the last 40 years or so. That type of war really does take a lot out of the ability of the people to remain resilient, both in terms of intelligence and as well as hope. Just looking into people's eyes, and you don't see any hunger for life. You don't see much curiosity. It's just they wake up and they know what their day is. They know how shit life is, and they know that it's going to be like that tomorrow. They know that, okay, the Russians were here one day, the Americans are here the next. There's resentment all around. They don't even know who to blame for their situation. They just blame whoever they get told. The religious influence over that population as well is absolutely huge. Everybody sort of believes a lie. Everyone's deluded in one extent or another. It's just, as my point is that delusion that everybody shares, again, is not equal. Some of those are more aligned to reality than others. And those that are more aligned to reality have a better chance in dealing with life. But when your belief is so opposed to reality, again, it's just failure after failure. I don't know, again, how much of a cultural thing it is, but over there, people didn't really have much respect for property. It might be because their property has been taken from them or destroyed or taken and sold, or however it is. But they don't seem to have much respect for property or for children or for innocence or anything like that.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for that insight. It really strikes me when you talk about sort of the human suffering and the exploitation that goes on, that really takes away the human sense of it. I think, you've been privileged to have such a sort of diverse view of the world from so many angles that people never, ever have the privilege to see it from. Maybe if you could just give us a little bit of insight, changes in your philosophical worldview coming from South Africa, where you were, in a sense, you had a happy childhood, and which a lot of us have shared with you in that sense. We had the same conditions where it was quite free, and we had a lot of fun and a lot of freedoms. And where you see other sides of the world where there is just immense suffering and almost no hope. What has this done from you from sort of a teenager point of view of worldviews that were put upon you, whether it be religious, Christian, democratic, socialistic, to wherever you are now, and how you, in a sense, see the world from sort of a philosophical worldview, as I think you have so much more richer experience to be able to give our viewership kind of a better perspective of what's out there?
I think that's a great question. For me, the childhood that we all experienced is something that is born from a victory of culture, a victory of agreements between peers, a victory of civilization and society. But we assume after a time that it's only one victory that needs to occur. Once you're in that mindset, you believe as though it'll never end. But it will always end, because there is always people who want that or want to bring you down. It's just the nature of the world. The nature of the world is a very, very dark place. And the light that places like our young South Africa shone is not the common. We shouldn't expect everybody to assume that is the normal, even though from our perspective, growing up in South Africa, it was. But that's not the reality of the world. These places, Rhodesia, early Rhodesia and South Africa, are jewels. They are a wondrous, wondrous achievements, and they should have been defended. Not just defended, they should have been protected from even needing to be defended. We let our guard down. We should never, ever, ever let our guard down. We should never assume that just because we're peaceful and we're happy and we're free, that extends to everybody else. We should never project our current situation or our beliefs on other people. You treat groups as groups, and you treat individuals as individuals. We don't treat everybody as though they're us, because they're not. And believing that they are, believing that there's some good in everybody, that's just not the case.
No, thanks a lot. Just that I couldn't agree more with those words. And I think people do forget that it takes great sacrifice to maintain your freedoms, especially the freedoms that our ancestors have died and fought for. I think there's a nice segue into, I kind of want to get your idea of, especially as you say, your father saw the problem in Rhodesia and then left in a timely manner. Could you give us kind of a perspective as to what was the markers in society at that time which your parents saw as kind of the nail in the coffin to which they decided to immigrate and leave away? Because obviously today we're in a very similar situation, that as frogs in the boiling pot, we don't really know when the temperature is too high, when we should jump out or when we should fight back, just so we can maybe draw some parallels as to that earlier situation and to today's.
Yeah, that's another great question. And I think that point of breaking is different to everyone. And I think it's one that is born from hopelessness. When you tried everything and you've thrown your whole existence at something, and not only do you fail, it seems like you're being directed to fail. It seems as though there is no structure there that you thought was there supporting you. And you think, what is it all for? How long must I suffer? At what point is it too much? At what point? There was an analogy that Stefan Molyneux once said, I remember a while ago. He said that if you're on the highway and there's an off-ramp and you're stuck in a queue, and if everybody is speeding past you and cutting you off and getting off the off-ramp, off the motorway, and you're stuck on the off-ramp, at some point, you have to get off that queue and cut somebody else off. That's the kind of idea. After a while, you just have to get off. Even though you want to follow the rules, even though you want to respect everybody and you want to be there for your people and to have a future that resembled your past, it just gets to a point, and that's an individual point. It depends on your situation. It depends on what support you have in your society. If you have any brotherhood, if you have any friendships, if your society is held together. But, when people are atomized into individuals and individualism is forced down their throat, you tend to lose perspective of the emergent property of what was there before. It makes, individuals more free to leave. I mean, if there was somebody there or some group or a way for us to communicate, to say, no, come on, stay, let's fight together, let's make it a better place. There was nobody having those conversations. All these things are in us, and we have them as mental thoughts, but we don't speak it out for fear of being called a name or whatever it may be. But these conversations, pulling your brother up when he's down, challenging him when he's walking away from the fight rather than engaging in it, these, I think, are where we're being let down. And it might have to do with this new age idea of forgiveness and Rainbow Nation and all the rest of it. Everybody's happy, everybody's good, it's all okay. And that's so pervasively shoved down your throat that when it's not okay, there is no structure there left to rein it in and say, no, now's the time to stand. Now's the time to do all this. And as you say, where is that boundary? When do you stay and fight? When is the time to retreat? When is the time to regroup? I mean, it's like an analog signal. It's all, very gradual. You don't have that breaking point unless in that situation where you're just so utterly hopeless that you have to take an alternate route.
Related to the current situation South Africa finds itself. If you compare things like farm murders, the high murder rate in South Africa, the high crime rate, the huge amount of private security industry we use in this country, compared to a country that actively has private military corporations or companies active in the area, and as someone who's seen that area, what is it like compared to South Africa?
When I left South Africa, my local police were still somewhat okay. The chief of the station was the same guy I had known my whole life, an Afrikaner gentleman, and he was a good, straight, honest man. One of the few that I've met. But in Afghanistan, everybody's black-pilled. In South Africa, you have crime that is committed all the time, not solved. Certain crimes get looked at more seriously than others. But in Afghanistan, if the forces weren't there that are there, it would just be utter lawlessness. I mean, the type of things that I've seen while we were there just blew my mind. There was a child sex den that we raided that had pre-packaged KY jelly and drugs, single-use dose, good to go. All males in a compound and all young children. And that was something that just blew my mind. That's the type of thing that's going on there. So I think it's degraded far more than South Africa is or was, at least when I was there. About me throwing myself into these situations where it's fight or flight. I mean, that is so critical. It's so important to find and face these pinch points, because that's truth of character. That's truth of who you are. You become truth in dealing with those situations. Yeah, like I said before, we can have this idea of who we are, and we can carry it about, and brag about it to everybody as a sort of defense mechanism, in my opinion. But when you actually throw yourself into that situation and you accept that failure is an option, and that is the end of your line, not just in terms of your death, but also your potential. This is your limit as a human being. I mean, I would be happy if I failed at everything that I tried, just to know that I had achieved the limits of myself as a human being in terms of my growth. So, I mean, that's incredibly enriching for me, to try to find the limits of my character and my body, my ability, my talents, and everything. I mean, to me, that's one of the great of being alive. So that's why I do that.
It's quite shocking to hear the multiple situations you've put yourself through. It's astounding to hear that not everything is sunshine and rainbows on the other side of the world, which is to be expected. I mean, not everything is sunshine and rainbows here in the Rainbow Nation either. But safety-wise, where would you consider a place like an active war zone like Afghanistan, where you have ready access to weaponry, to self-defense, at least to various forms of protection, How would you compare that to the safety and security in South Africa?
That's an amazing question, and there's so many analogies that I can put on top of that to crystallize that the thought that I had. So yes, absolutely. We were fully prepped, we were fully trained, we had our defenses sorted, and we're fully protected. There were occasions and some locations that were attacked directly, but those were largely unsuccessful. But the interesting thing is that the majority of the attacks and battlefield fatalities that occurred when I was in the region was through green on blue attacks, where the people we were training were either co-opted, bribed, or planted enemy soldiers who then, in the course of being trained on how to fire a weapon in the heart of the camp, just went rogue and started shooting, completely aimlessly at everyone and everything that they could. So the reason why I say that's an interesting analogy is because it's reflects the situation in Europe and what was the situation in South Africa. You can have your defenses set, you can have your borders, you can have all these things, but when something insidious under the face of innocence gets brought in from within, there's huge vulnerabilities there. And I think there's a lesson to be learned in that. Just before I conclude the thought, there's an old pagan story about the death of Balder. Balder was a son, a god, a son of Odin, and he was killed by his deaf and blind brother after, the trickster Loki had put a specific holly branch in his, as an arrow, and he shot him because just before this all happened, Balder is the god of light, shining, hope, all the joy and goodness of the world. And the mother of this god had gone around and made agreements with everything that she could possibly think of, all the giants, all the regular enemies of what is thought to be the enemy of joy and light, etc., except for the holly, because it's so insignificant and we don't see it and it has no roots. It's just there. That was what was used to attack this god. And the thing that I get from that story, it's just a story, of course. I don't believe it's a literal thing at all. But the interesting thing, the truth of wisdom that's in there is that what is good in this world is killed by the ignorant after being manipulated by the trickster. And that's a formula that is being used hugely today. Hugely.
Yeah, thanks for that story. And the more you talk about this, the more I get this image of how we've been kind of seduced in a way of we had a good childhood and everything was easy. Like you said, we kind of inherited a society in kind of moral decay on its way down, but it's still technologically quite advanced and quite developed in a sense. And it seems there was no urgency for, I think, our parents to raise us with this type of urgency to protect what we've inherited, protect the civilization we had, and obviously try and fight for it in a sense. And you speak about kind of being black-pilled. I'd like to get sort of your view on how would you go about, and this is kind of the purpose of our project that we have here, is how do you go about instilling as many black pills into sort of the hearts and minds of white and Afrikaner men in this country to, in a sense, wake up from sort of their nihilistic coma, I would feel. I have this experience every now and again around the campfire of kind of trying to yell at my friends and asking them, like, what are we doing? Why are we doing all these fun activities when, everything's burning and the tide's coming in? And there is a sense of, what could we change now? There's nothing we could do. We're so far behind. What is kind of your answer to that? If you had kind of this platform to speak to those type of men?
The success that I've had in obtaining my own brotherhood around me at the moment has not been directly created. I mean that to say, I didn't go to those individuals and say, shit's hitting the fan, we need to get our crap together. Nothing as direct as that. However, one day I have a farm here in Italy, and I was chopping wood, and I had never chopped wood before. I was just trying to learn how to do it efficiently and apply my brain to it. A Budamaka plan, so to speak. You try to improve your systems to be more efficient at cutting the wood and making planks, etc. And I realized that if you place the axe in just the right place, you could split the log quite easily. And what I got from that experience is that doing things in getting experiences, even though it might just be fun, it might not be super serious, but there are truths that emerge from doing these physical activities. And so then I started to go into the mountains, mountain climbing and spending times doing survival in the woods and these type of things. And with my military background, slowly sort of subtly dropping these truth pills into the actions that I was doing with these guys, sort of in a way training them on just the realities of life by doing certain things, by teaching them how to track and how to shoot and how to do all the rest of it. Something started to emerge, we started to challenge each other. We started to try and improve our situation, help each other up in life. And as that sort of identity emerged, it became something that we wanted to protect. It became obvious to us that we could see all the other people around us, all the other males in society, all chasing tail and trying to make money and do all these things to try and be the individual with the most clouts. It just lost all its flavor. The things that we were doing and the interactions that we had with each other and the experiences that we shared, none of these other guys had. And so that brought us closer together. And that relationship and those experiences and the joy that we have from being with one another and testing each other. I mean, it grows. It just naturally grows as that one-upmanship in that context of brotherhood happens. You start doing more things. I bet you I can beat you at wrestling. And then you start training yourself with your guys doing wrestling. And then before you know it, you've spent 6-8 months, doing this on the weekend or on week evenings, and you develop an ability to wrestle, and this type of thing just continues and continues and continues, and then it sort of emerges out of that interaction. In terms of trying to wake people up while doing that, I'd say you have to put yourself in a situation of danger before any real pill gets swallowed. So we have a saying in my group. Dauda ella met nader. That means death or glory. So when we see something that one of us wants to do and it's a bit dangerous, we say, okay, death or glory, let's go for it. And of course, we take all the precautions and we apply our mind to the things that we do and make sure that we come out of it. But there's always that risk there. And when you're investing so heavily, with such a lot on the line, it becomes quite serious. And from that seriousness and honesty, you can begin to discuss these things without fear of being cast out or them dropping you as soon as some kind of accusation comes out or something like that. I've had an experience recently that's been tough for me to go through, but these guys have been there for me, man. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. They've been there for me more than some of my family has, and that's a testament to the importance of the brotherhood. If you have a look at any sports hero, Conor McGregor or any other star, they're not individuals who just happen to have walked into the forest and come out some super sportsman. No, they have a team behind them, and that's that team supports them. It calls them on their bullshit. It sharpens iron against iron, and it develops that person, and that person who leads is acknowledged as a leader. It's not something that gets taken or something that is enforced. It's something that happens naturally in that kind of structure, whereby those who are really, really good at certain things, through this iron against iron, testing yourself, putting yourself in harsh situation, archetypes of individuals start to emerge in that group context, and those leaders are the type of people who take things on into the next step. So, one of the reasons why I guess we're failing so much is because we lack leadership, not in terms of being told what to do, but actual good quality heroic leaders. We don't have those, or if we do have them, we don't believe in them because we haven't been in that process with them, in that brotherhood with them, watching them beat everybody else around them in whatever task it is, whether it's in writing or finances, or if it's in something physical. When you're in that brotherhood and you're there every day. So when I do some kind of historic European martial arts with my friends as well, we do a bit of longsword fighting. And there's a guy who always wins. We know he's always going to win. So if it ever comes time where we need to defend ourselves using swords, we know who we're going to get to lead us. I mean, that's the type of confidence and knowledge and planning that gets developed in this kind of brotherhood structure. And it also enforces standards or sets standards and grows agreements between people. When this deteriorates, it almost, like it is today, anything's possible. You can call yourself whatever you want, and then there is nobody calling you out in it. There's nobody snapping you back into reality. And I think that was a function that Brotherhood served. And if you have a look at how male-only spaces have been attacked, as well as all the other insidious forms of deception and degenerate behavior entering into society, you can see that we're being attacked at all levels of our depth. So it's important to try really, really hard to find good people and start testing yourselves and getting confidence and getting knowledge in what you can do and who is good at what, so that when things really do get bad, things sort of happen quite quick.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more in how male-only spaces have been attacked. It's just words like bromance are attacked and mocked. And, in a sense, the MGTOWs are left alone, but they're left alone because they generally aim not to contribute to the world anymore, as they don't really form nuclear families anymore.
Yeah, to me, MGTOW is just people walking away from the battle because the battle is too hopeless for them to win. Sometimes you fight knowing you'll lose. That's just what it means to be a man. Just because things are tough, we don't, turn tail and walk into the sea and drown ourselves just because things are hard. I think MGTOW's the wrong answer.
No, 100%. It's for me also a nihilistic turn that is gone into just enjoy your life and what's left of the remains, where you basically spit in the face of your ancestors who fought for you to get here. I want to go a little bit into where you talk about brotherhood, because, some great practical examples that you give us all, and I hope our listenership listens to that. And I agree with you. There is a sense of either if you don't see leaders, you should have become the leader yourself and put yourself out there. And as you say, death for glory is kind of, for me, the definition in a sense of courage. It is, you shouldn't be foolhardy, but you should be courage. There should be risk involved in your behavior. I just want to get your feeling on, because I always find when, communicating with males around me, there's a lack of a kind of a group meaning. There's a lack of a group goal that everyone agrees upon. And we went to Urania, and for me, always what really touched me is how the whole town really has one goal, and it's so easy. It's so easy to form these type of relationships and form these bonds and to grow in yourself if you are all united around that one goal and meaning. And for me, that's the challenge in a sense. If you want to build a brotherhood, you have to focus on certain values. And the difficulty for me is getting these values across. So my question is, in a way and sense, what type of values, or should I say virtues, you focus in when you talk about brotherhood, when you build this? And then a second question on a different philosophical point. You speak a lot about, if I understand it correctly, sort of your doubts about individualism. Maybe give me a bit of a clarity on, do you see any difference, say, on the concept of individualism and, say, anarchism and these type of voluntarist movements going on? Do you see that as a way forward, or is that also a bit naive in the sense that we do have to kind of form a collective around a sort of built around goal, agreed upon goal? Sorry if that was a bit lengthy.
No problem at all. So I've been trying to understand the first question in as much depth as I can, trying to understand where exactly these values come from, whether it's through shared experience, whether it's through as a genetic phenotype, as music and art and culture is a result or an extended phenotype of certain genetics mixed with the environment. Where does it come from? How to instill these in a group is very, very difficult to answer. I don't know if the group has to be similar along genetic lines as well as ideological lines, or whether it's enough just to force these values through. But what I would say as a good foundation for any of this is two things. First of all, honesty among each other. That's a huge one. And it's one that's quite easy to do if you guys are testing each other all the time. That's where the honesty comes from. You can't help but be honest. But the most important thing, the most important thing, and I think it's the most rarest attribute of a man today, or even an individual at all, is self-deception. People are lying to themselves so often. It's so easy to lie to yourself, to say, I'm not going to do this today because of this and that and that, finding excuses and just giving yourself an out. I would say try to, first of all, create an environment where it's very, very difficult for anyone to be anything but honest, and to try and develop self-honesty. Accept what you find. Test yourself and accept what you find, even if it's bad. That is who you are. Accept it. If you have a map and you have a destination, let's say we've got a map of Orania in front of us. We know where we want to go. We lie about where our current position is. Well, our plan to get from A to B isn't going to work. Or if you have that same map and that same destination, but you don't know at all where you are, again, you've got nowhere to begin your journey from. So that's self-honesty. That's fact-finding about who you are as a person is the first step to growing yourself, to developing yourself as a human being. And finding that first step, in my understanding, as I've tried to go through this process myself, is to test yourself in as many varied forms as possible, to find exactly, yes, I believe this, I think this, but is that actually true of me? And the more answers you get, the more you find where you are and who you are as a human, then the self-deception becomes harder and harder because you know who you are. You've tested who you are. So I would say try to develop some mechanism to develop those values. In terms of your second question, individualism, it's interesting, very, very interesting, especially with the success of Jordan Peterson lately. People are craving, they're craving knowledge, they're craving some form of leadership, they're craving the brotherhood without even knowing it. But the thing about individualism, at least for me, I live, like I said, on a farm, and I have a river right next to my house, and on the other side of the river is a natural wood, one that's been going for millennia, and it's in fact got a Roman road that runs through it, thousands and thousands of years old. And on the other, it's a bunch of fields that have been purchased by a paper factory, and they grow trees on those fields. And one forest and the other forest is completely different. If you have a look at two exemplars, two trees from either field, from either the natural wood or the other wood, if you look at them as individualistic or as individual trees, there's not much to tell about them. There's not much difference amongst them. But when you take a step back and you have a look at the emergent property of those two separate situations, you can see that one is impenetrable. One has a story to tell. One is naturally developed and has all sorts of, in a way, chaotic or some sort of anarchy-based system, in that it just formed over, natural selection or whatever situation it was. But it's really, really hard to defeat a forest like that. But the other is designed to be harvested. It's designed so that all the trees are the same. It's designed so that the machines can handle the processing of the trees. And this focus on individualism, taking away identity, a group identity, is the preparation of the individual to be treated like that tree. No difference to anyone else, easy to be harvested, easy to be farmed, and easy to be controlled. And that's my opinion on why individualism is shilled so heavily, is that these people who are looking for brotherhood, who are looking for this emergent property of having something to connect to defend, to that idea that you were speaking about before, about having something as an identity to call back to, that is being completely stripped away. So my take on individualism is that being an individual is great and all, but it comes at a great cost. So if you just want to live and die and have a meaningless existence and just stand for nothing and just live according to the rules because it's easy, you can be an individualist if you like. But in my opinion, walking through a natural forest and spending the time getting to know the individual trees, I see so much variety and beauty, and it just amazes me and takes my breath away. Every time I go into the forest, I see a different look. But when I go into the other, it's just dead. It's just dead. Even the way that they treat that wood. They take the roots of that wood and they dig it up and chop it up and splay it all over the ground to be fertilizer for the next generation of individualistic trees. And I think that having a look at that, just living in my house every day is giving me a bit of an inside look as to what the cost of individualism is, I think. I mean, especially when you see how the roots of our cultures is completely torn up, dragged up, and strewn around like it's nothing.
Speaking of roots and of heritage, of tradition, you've given us a few examples, and you seem to have a good grasp of stories and the ideas and the information contained within stories. And you've also made an effort to reconnect with your European roots. Basically, by doing that, you're getting in touch with a part of your heritage that, again, many South Africans, many Afrikaner males don't necessarily have access to. What would you perhaps suggest to white males, to Afrikaner males, that they can reconnect with their heritage? And South Africa itself has a very rich history, a very rich tradition, also rich folklore. What would you suggest as practical means to reconnect with your roots in order to strengthen your future, if I could put it that way?
Absolutely. So the way I'll go about answering that is to first say that the current paradigm is the consumption of the future for the comforts of the present. That's because they don't care about the future, or they have no ties to the past. So they're nihilistic in that point of view. Everything for now. They have no sense of time. Even our enemies, and I do think we have them, they are looking at things in a totally different time scale than what we are. We're thinking in terms of one lifetime, and these people are thinking multi-generationally. So what I would say is we are both our past and our future. Again, it ties back into individualism. So the way that I see it, there was bloodshed and victories won and sacrifice made many, many, many generations ago to give us what is classed as our privilege today. And for us to bring that forward, we have to act as a bridge for those values to cross the breadth of time. And that's how we earn it. People say that we have no claim or to be proud of where we come from, because that isn't us. And that we didn't earn any of the privilege that we currently have. But to that argument, I would say that how you behave for those values that your forefathers had to give you your privilege, how you act as a man to carry those over from one generation to the next, is how you earn it. The sacrifice that was made by those men who didn't get to enjoy the fruits of their labor, it is our privilege, and it is also our duty to appreciate that and to protect that and to acknowledge that and pass it on.
No, that's perfectly said. Thanks. No, I'm kind of struck by the, I thought I had a discussion the other day, and we were talking about, especially as you mentioned, things like pride. Like, are we allowed to be proud for our ancestors and what they've built? And strangely enough, in this country and in the wider world at the moment, kind of Western men at large are kind of blamed as if guilt is given to us through generations for past sins, whether we call it sins or not. And in a sense, if we are if we are allowed to take collective guilt passed by our ancestors, then surely we should be able to be proud for what was given through us. And the thought just hit me in a sense that, yes, if we do take pride in these things, we should also then we should also be able to take the responsibility. And I think it is that responsibility that we've kind of let go, and that is what you speak about, is that responsibility to then sacrifice and maintain what has been given and to stand on shoulders and to move forward.
Yeah.
I'm just going to move on to sort of like maybe a controversial question, since I just want to get your feel, as you've been around many cultures, and I would say religions as well. What is sort of your viewpoint on the effect that you think, for me, it's always interesting to think what is kind of what is the thing keeping the Afrikaner back from fighting? What is the thing keeping, what is that line keeping him back from engaging? And, it was interesting to think about the history of the Afrikaner, which is so intertwined with Christianity. And, Christianity has changed over time, as you know, from the times of the Inquisition to today, where it is generally all about forgiveness and altruism. And in a sense, how much of an effect do you think Christianity has in subduing kind of the fire within the white man today? And then another question to that is, what is, as you've seen so many cultures, and it also touched me in a way that where you said you went and where you saw all these sort of pedophilic rings going on, and in a sense, it is just the thought that comes to me immediately is I think, well, yes, you are entering into that area to try and rid that from a society, but for me, it's whether you're there or not, would that ever make a difference? Because it is ingrained, maybe genetically, maybe culturally, within a society. How much can you really change by intermixing with the society? And again, that was just my thought. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But what is your viewpoint and maybe your black pill idea on sort of the multiculturalism that has been tried here in South Africa? So sorry, that's two questions again. What do you think about sort of the effect of Christianity, and whether that is something we should use to strengthen? And then secondly, sort of this multiculturalism, do you see it at all working in South Africa?
To answer your first question, observation is born from contrast. So unless things are defined and different, there's nothing to be seen. There is nothing that will stand out. It's all just one nothingness. So my experience of meeting so many different cultures has made me appreciate all of them in all of their own respects, or maybe not appreciate all of them, but to acknowledge all of them, and to see, at least from my perspective, which ones I believe are better at certain things and worse at others. So a multicultural society where everything is mixed in, and that I think is a terrible, terrible mistake. So much is lost that the emergent property of beautiful different cultures is absolutely a travesty. It's completely gone. So I like the idea of people having a place of their own, but not being shy to visit and experience and to appreciate others. Just because you appreciate other cultures doesn't mean you have to destroy your own. Just because you protect your own culture doesn't mean you have to destroy others. That false dichotomy has gone too far, and we need to put a stop to that. In terms of Christianity, I have a few problems with it in the way it practically rolls out. The main one I have is tolerance. I don't tolerate a knife in my side. I don't tolerate a thief in my house. For tolerance to be seen as a virtue, it's just a rolling over and allowing your enemies to do whatever they want to you. So until that aspect of Christianity is taken out or accounted for, I don't think it will serve as much of a protection for a people, because Christianity is the exact tool that is used to remove a people from its culture. In that time, it could be considered that their pagan cultures were barbaric or whatever, but the unity that was experienced through Christianity, it was quite a destructive thing in terms of what was before. So if you're looking to protect something that existed, you should be careful not to use Christianity as a defense. It's a good tool for like-minded people to express amongst each other when you have a certain level of agreements amongst people in society, where certain things or values are considered ironclad. Then it's okay. But when there are unscrupulous people who have no depth to their depravity, and you're met with a tolerant, open society, what you see as virtue is literally an open invitation to be attacked. What I learned from the military is that if you want to defend ground, you have to occupy ground. And even though that ground might be yours on paper, unless you're there occupying it, the enemy will just see it as an advantage and penetrate. And it's just that simple. So when the Christian mindset does a good thing in the world, it may be a good thing in the world, or the people who are seeing it, who are receiving that good thing, who might not be worthy of that good thing, might just see it as an invitation to take more. So I would be very careful in using Christianity as some sort of vanguard against what's happening. I think it has to be more blood and soil than that. Tolerance, I'd say, is the main issue. It just allows you to be open to anything, which is strange for me to say, because I was raised as a Catholic, heavy Catholic. So, I did the whole lot. But again, in my personal experience, having an attitude that was prescribed to me by that religion hasn't served at all. In fact, in the world that I live in, it's a tremendous weakness. And yes, there is some valor in leading with your chin. But at the end of the day, if you have an enemy who knows how to box, you'll get knocked out. That's just the reality of the world. So from my point of view, I was, caught up in the whole initial atheistic movement and all the rest of it, cold hard facts, etc. But then I realized that a synonym for spirituality is perspective. And I got that understanding when I was on top of a mountain that it was a very, very old pagan mountain called Kalovrat in Slovenia, and was also the scene of a few battles in the world wars. And as I stood on top of that mountain and having a look over the valley and into, the Italian country on one hand, into the floodplain, and the interior of Slovenia on the other, I had the perspective that, men had stood there before me, thousands of men through the ages. And to me, that was a spiritual experience. That was a perspective inducing experience. And that sort of spirituality or perspective, or whatever you want to call it, I think is invaluable. It gives you your place in time and scale. And I think it's hugely enriching in your life. I mean, music, listening to music, getting a song that just fits your mood just right at the right point in your life. There is an emergent property of going through that is overwhelming. And those type of things are hugely important. Just because there are arguments out there that say that God exists or doesn't exist, whatever it may be, to me, that's not the relevant question. The relevant question is, while I'm going through what I'm going through, how can I maximize the experience as much as possible? Because life is significant and life is precious, and we should try to live it and experience it with wide opened eyes. So to stand upon a mountain and feel the generations of men touching my shoulder for thousands of years in the past, that's a hugely rooting experience that has no basis in reality or fact or whatever you want to call it, but is something that tied me to my roots and made me understand the sacrifice and significance of the land that I'm stood upon. And these type of experiences, going to places like that, or just being able to achieve perspective in a way. Even if it's in church, in the church that your grandfather built, just to have the perspective, of something greater than you. I'm not the only person who sat in this chair. My grandfather built this chair. Just to have that to me is the type of spiritual experience that I'm after, is to understand the grand play, not my particular part in it. If that's, given over to God, or if it's given over to my heritage, I think it's amazing. if I have a look at the tapestry of European history, it's so amazing. I mean, the archetypes of individuals that have emerged, the hero, the villain, the mighty, all the old pagan gods. I mean, these aren't actual gods, of course. They're just archetypes of humans that have emerged after throwing themselves against nature for generation after generation after generation. And individuals within that group is the thread that knits that tapestry. And to stand back and have a look at it, it's awe-inspiring, and it's a spiritual process. So I think spirituality is very important, and I wouldn't disregard it just because I have a few critiques of Christianity.
Yeah, very, very well said. And I think even people, if you look at what is going on in the world, and even for those who say that they are opposed to any spiritual thought, there are still mostly groups who are trying to destroy the past, destroy history by taking down statues. And obviously we see groups like ISIS do that. They destroy temples and historic statues. But then you also see groups like Antifa do it and trying to destroy statues. And even in our country at the moment, a lot of the old statues from old presidents and Afrikaner heroes, I would say, is being attacked and under threat. And that is kind of when we went to Iran as well, that there is this tribute to old heroes. And I agree with you very much that people should take the time to indulge in that and try and experience the past through these type of, materialistic things in a sense. So, in a way of just coming to the end of the show, I'd just like to ask you, as you seem to be obviously a very practical and nature oriented man, and can you kind of just leave us with what you would say, given the present and current situation here in South Africa, that for the average man receiving his first, shall we say, black suppository pill tonight, what is the steps that he should take? What is maybe the most efficient steps he should take to try and either form his own brotherhood and maybe try to find a path to protect himself and protect his family and find his way to becoming a better version of himself?
The first thing is, again, try to be honest with yourself. It's incredibly difficult. I mean, I fail at it all the time. I catch myself like, oh, you've just done it again. Try to be honest with yourself. It's absolutely crucial. Like, get that foundation, and then you can start to analyze your life and record your life, and then see where you want to go and try to go there. At least you know where you are and you know where you want to be, and you can take some practical steps to be there. The second thing is to the uninitiated man who is, trapped in the city, who hasn't really experienced the rawness of life. I would say try to become more comfortable being outside. Just be comfortable in the wild, in the environment. It's scary at first, when you go into the bush, if you've been in the city for a long time. Take precautions. You'll probably pack 10,000 things that you don't need, but that'll sort itself out over time, and you'll slowly get the hang of it. I mean, it's a natural thing after all. That's where we are from, so it'll come back to you. And the other thing is, you need to be in your public spaces, guys. You absolutely have to be there. You can't sit only in your bedrooms and, chat to people online and stay in your isolated homes, in your gated communities. No, you must be in the space. You must occupy the space. Otherwise, your enemies will. It is that simple. So even if you're just, getting around, going from one neighbor to the next, getting to know your neighbors, speaking to them, playing chess on a corner. If you have a look at those old movies, people were always on the streets, doing things on the street. They were never doing things all privately in their home. So we should consider, taking back our public spaces, interacting with them, not being afraid to be there, even though it's rampant with crime, even though it's a nasty place at the moment. Be there. Be there with your friends, start to meet people, grow your group in any way you can. Get some things going. I mean, you don't need equipment or money to learn how to wrestle or grab a few sticks and learn how to whack them together. There's things that you can do that interest men that will bring you together just by doing it. And I would say, just try and get out there and do it. Even though, your 9 to 5 is there and you've got family responsibilities and all the rest of it, you must make that sacrifice. Otherwise, you will be sacrificed. I think that's the best way to put it.
You also speak about some of this on your own channels and your own blog. Could you perhaps tell us a bit more about your YouTube and your Bitchute channels, as well as your blog, and what your aims are in producing content, getting the word out about some of these concepts that we've spoken of tonight?
Yeah, so my YouTube and my blog and all that is a bit of a experiment in a way. I mean, I really appreciate these kind of interviews because I can really elucidate the points that I'm trying to make and speak about them quite clearly. But I try to rely heavily on metaphor in the work that I do, because I think it's number one, entertaining, and number two, not very preachy. I don't think I have all the answers. I don't believe that I'm the guy to give all the answers, but I can create or draft narratives that ask certain questions or push certain points if they read into a little bit. So I try to write poetry and things like that, all the things that were sniggered at, like you said, bromance and things like that. These are important things, to take control of your art. Just before I close off, to hammer that point home, I see humans as reflections on the surface of a boiling lake. We're unable to change our genetics. It's like the reflection trying to change the tree that's casting. But the surface of the water can shape the reflection. It can mold it, and culture and art and media and these type of things is that surface. So I think it's important to take back that surface and to mold us in a way that we see fit, not that others see fit. And by doing that, it means we have to create our own art, we have to create our own music, and we have to create our own films and entertainment. And that's what I've decided that I would do.
Okay, great. Well, it sounds excellent. We look forward to a lot of the content you produce, and especially the content to come. Just as we close off, is there any other social media where can people reach out to you if you're open to it, and any other links that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, I do have a few. Probably best to just put it in the description if that's okay. Otherwise, it's Eldr, ELDR on Twitter. And on YouTube, it's Eldr the same. Bitchute is also Eldr, so just type that in and you'll find me.
Okay, great. I must admit it's been a very interesting conversation, very insightful, and definitely something that I find inspiring. And I'm very happy we finally had the chance to speak with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You always have an open door to come and speak on again. By all means, we'd love to have you on again. I think this is a conversation that doesn't end here. A lot of these topics will have to be spoken of again, some of them a bit more in depth. I think there's much more to be said.
No, I completely agree. And I'd like to extend my availability to anybody who's really, really struggling back home in South Africa. If you need to come out and take a break, or just, come some of me with some seriously struggling in a dire need of some assistance. I have space on my farm, and I know that the Afrikaner people are very, very hardworking, and it would be absolutely amazing to help out and have a family, come over if that's something that needs to happen to save them, or whatever that may be. And I appreciate the offer to come back. I really enjoyed the chat. One thing just before I go is that it might sound like that I'm, on the ball and I'm doing everything and fighting everything that I can. But there is a lot that you must understand, that there's a lot of pain that goes with that sacrifice. And don't be afraid if you start to hurt when you start to step out. That's just the way that things go. When you're on the front line, you take hits, and don't be discouraged. Just keep going forward.
Definitely excellent advice. And we encourage all our listeners to, if they feel they want to contact you regarding any information or any options as to get out when so-called shit hits the fan here in South Africa, thank you for that kind extension, that kind offer. We will definitely include all the links so that people can contact you. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. And we look forward to conversations in the future.
Thank you very much, guys. It would be great to share a beer with you someday.
No, we hope that possibility materializes. I'm sure Sina thinks the same.
Yeah, no, I was thinking definitely one day the next interview we have with you is going to be on your farm, hopefully, and we'll be roasting some beers. That sounds like a most gracious invite that we definitely will take, hopefully one day.
Sounds amazing.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this Boer Republic podcast. We encourage you to reach out to Eldr, and please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. We highly encourage any comments and feedback from our listeners. And if you feel that this resonates with you, please reach out to us. We felt it appropriate to end off this episode with a song that seems to perfectly encapsulate what it takes to be a man who seeks improvement and a brighter future. Sacrifice and hardship are key aspects to rising like the phoenix from the ashes of today's society. In such a way, the song that you're about to hear reflects this. The song is called Man Made, and it is available on Bitchute. The words are by Mark Brahmin and can be found online with a quick search. He does excellent work, and I encourage everyone to go and read up on what he has written and what he has focused on. The words, along with the music, is more than apt for the times we live in. The music specifically is by Xurious, who was recently banned from YouTube, all for the crime of making inspiring music. I personally encourage you to check out his work on Twitter, Bitchute, and SoundCloud if you enjoy his brand of music. That should be a good indication, though, of the censorship and challenge we face today, and that the struggles ahead have not abated. Because of that, though, neither should we.
For a different age I was born, every man has once said, where each was to honour swan, rather to all this cowardice bred. Thus for a gilded time we mourn, insisting such days forever dead. Yet of all the feelings ever known, longing for a time not your own is when true cowardice is shown, especially if dark the age has grown. For like dawn light in black zone, all darkness will be overthrown. All darkness will be overthrown. Instead, one is given a great gift, born in darkness and darkest days. He is given trials, mountains to lift, aye, the very minotaur in his maze. He is called to be strong, to be swift, a hero upon which his sons gaze. So appear you king, or appear you slave, among the good, or a people strayed, with actions now the future pave. For the coward is he who delayed, product of his age, cradle to grave. But an age makes not, it is man-made. It is man-made.